Hey again, this is Angela from As Above Astrology. As I mentioned in my previous video, I'm going to dive into an in-depth analysis now on why I came to the conclusion that I came to about the mystery package that arrived on my porch. So I'm just going to jump straight into it. I'm going to assume that you watched my previous video. So the question is, am I going to find the owner of the package and return the package to them? So the first thing that I do when I look at a chart is I have to determine who the significators are, and who significates what in the question. So in this question, there's me. I'm the person asking the question. So I'm the querent. There's Jane Doe, who is the other person. And then there's Jane Doe's lost item, which is the package. So I'm the first house. I'm right here. This is me. And on the first house cusp, the ascendant, we can see 10 Aries. So that means that my significator is Mars and my co-significator is the moon. Jane Doe is the seventh house. And you can see on the descendant here, the seventh house cusp, we have Libra. We're at 10 Libra there. So that means that Venus is Jane Doe's significator. And then the second house is items that we can pick up and move. It's things that we possess, things that we own. But it's not my second house, it's Jane Doe's second house. So we're not going to use this house here. We're going to use the eighth house, which is second from 7. So the eighth house, you can see on the cusp that we have Scorpio. So that's also Mars. So we can't have Mars represent both myself and the package. So we're going to go ahead and use the moon as my significator. And then Mars will be the significator of the package. And Venus will be the significator still for Jane Doe. So when I'm first looking at this chart, the first thing that strikes me is that Venus is on the ascendant. She's in Aries. So Venus is in detriment. Venus is ruled by Mars because Mars rules Aries. She's in detriment. That means that the loss of this package has put her in a bad state. She's moving into the 12th house. So that tells me I'm not going to see her, find her, hear from her. She will just kind of disappear from my awareness, from my thoughts. Okay. So that's what's happening with Venus. She is making and applying square to Mars, which is the package. So squares are really tough angles. It's kind of a blind side. And the other thing about this is that that square is never going to perfect. So on March 1st, Venus gets to 10 Aries, and then she stops and she's going to go backwards all the way to 24 Pisces. And she's going to start her retrograde phase. So this square aspect is never even going to perfect. And even if it did, it would still be nearly impossible for her to find the package, for her to come into contact with that on her own. So that tells me no, just Venus and Mars on their own. They're never really going to come into contact in this horary chart. The chances are not good for her to find the package. We're going to get the moon involved now. So we can see that there's a separating opposition between Venus and the moon. So the moon is separating from Venus. And you can see that the moon is in Libra, which is the sign that Venus rules. So that means that the moon has to receive Venus, but Venus is in detriment. So that's not good for the moon. Venus being in a bad place, if I were to, let's say, like if I were to call her, I would expect, especially because this is an opposition, for there to be some tension, maybe an unpleasant conversation. Maybe she's really upset and she thinks I'm like a customer service representative and takes it out on me. I don't know exactly how that would look, but it wouldn't be pleasant for me. So you can also see from the fact that this is a separating aspect that the moon being the faster planet applied to oppose Venus, and then that aspect is already separating. So the action that the moon took was in the past. So that was my phone call from yesterday. I left a voicemail, I did a phone call, and Venus didn't take it very well, right? So Venus is not in a good place. So because this is a separating aspect, that tells me there's no future communication coming between the moon and Venus, or Venus and the moon. If it was an applying aspect, I would assume that there would be a communication coming in the future, but there's not. So then we can see that, so Venus is in Mars's sign. So Venus is subject to the loss of the package. That's probably why she's upset. The moon has to receive Venus because the moon is in Venus's sign. So this is me. I have to receive, well, Jane Doe's item is what I have right now. So I'm trying to get a hold of her. I'm doing something on her behalf. And then we have Mars, who is in my sign. So I rule the package, right? Like it's in my home. And you can actually see quite literally, this is another reason why I chose to use the moon as my only significator and let the package be Mars, is because Mars is in my fourth house, and the fourth house represents my property and my home that I live in. So Mars is at the end of his retrograde station cycle. He's almost at second station. He's just got a few more minutes left to go to get to 17 degrees in 1 minute Cancer. And he's going to be here for a little bit. So the package isn't going to go anywhere. And the package isn't in the greatest shape, right? It's in the wrong place. There was a hole in the front of the package when I got it. So that just reaffirms to me that the package is Mars. So then what? Well, Venus is going to get to 10 Aries in about 2 weeks. She's going to stop and she's going to go backwards. So that angle is never going to perfect. Mars is going to start moving forwards in about a week when his retrograde cycle is over. So Mars isn't going to finish going backwards to perfect that square either. And that's not a good angle of aspect anyways. If I were to try and, wrestle with an opposition and there's an applying square between my significator in the package here, like there's not much that I can do to work with this. So I made the decision that I'm not going to reach out again for a little bit, but I did, oops, wrong picture. See if this is it. Nope, that's not it. Here it is. I decided that I'm going to make a phone call to Jane Doe on April 3rd. And the reason for this is I took the same significators that I had before. So Venus gets to 10 Aries, and then she goes backwards all the way to 24 Pisces. On her way backwards, she's eventually going to be making a trine with Mars. So I just went into my astrology app and I calculated backwards by, I basically solved for when is this trine going to take place. So that trine perfects on April 3rd, or I'm sorry, April 6th is when they're both, so Venus is at 25 Pisces and Mars is at 25 Cancer. But I don't, my significator is still the moon, and I don't want the moon to be applying to Mars. So I gave her a 24 degree distance between myself and Mars, because Mars is the lesser malefic, and I don't want that influencing how the conversation goes. So I just want Jane Doe to have easy access to her package, her lost package. So I'm going to go ahead and call on April 3rd when the moon is not within range for Mars. The other thing that I noticed about this, and the reason that I said I don't think that Jane Doe will be returning my call is so Jane Doe is Venus, and as Venus, she stops at 10 Aries, and then she's going to go backwards. As she does that, she's going to run into Mercury, who is retrograde in Pisces. Pisces is one of two signs where Mercury is in detriment. Mercury does have mutual receptivity with Jupiter right now, who is in Gemini, which is Mercury's sign, and Pisces is Jupiter's sign, so they're in each other's signs. They do get some mutual receptivity, so there is something about the communication in this situation that will work out. And the dragon's head is right here, the node of the dragon's head. So that's a minor good luck charm. So I would derive from this, and Saturn is right here too. So Saturn is the greater malefic. He imposes restrictions and limitations on us. I would derive from this that Mercury in a water sign is slow or mute. So slow to speak or mute. So she's not going to say anything about it, but then, there will be an unexpected phone call maybe from me. That's my guess, is that my phone call is probably this little dragon's head event for her where she realizes, oh, I can get this back. But with Mercury being in a water sign, so that's mute or slow to speak, and Saturn being right there, which is imposing restrictions on Venus being able to do anything, because Venus is in Pisces, she's exalted in Pisces, so she's in good shape, except, she's conjunct Mercury in detriment, which becomes a malefic in that case, and Saturn in Pisces, who is a malefic. So between Mercury and Saturn becoming malefics in this scenario, it's kind of putting a dampener on what Venus can do in this situation for our poor Jane Doe who lost her package. So I'm going to have to do something to take action and step in. So I will call her again, is how I interpreted that. And I just used the same significators from the horary chart to kind of make my election. Because I would assume that when Venus gets to 10 Aries and starts going backwards, that happens real time, right? So when we get to the real time part where she's making a trine with Mars, the significator of the package, there will be a much more easy connection between Venus and Mars, so Jane Doe and her lost object. And that is how I got to that conclusion. That is why I picked this time in this chart. I might refine the time just a little bit so that I'm, maybe putting some better significators on the ascendant, because I guess in the ascendant in this case, I would be Venus, but I'm going to try and play around a little bit with the time, but this is the date that I will call her. And that is why. So that's how I got to my conclusion. And that's how I run a horary chart. So if you were ever wondering what that was, if you've never heard of it before, that is the methodology that I apply. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.